5G and mobile edge compute are poised to help modernize military bases by wirelessly connecting all kinds of devices and vehicles operating within the DOD's network infrastructure. That in turn holds the promise of gathering data and helping officials make decisions more quickly and ultimately better supporting the warfighter. But a lot is involved in integrating 5G into base operations. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and here to talk about that today are Amanda Toman, Acting Principal Director, 5G Initiative for the U.S. Department of Defense, and Bryan Schromsky, Managing Partner, 5G Public Sector at Verizon. Amanda and Bryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wyatt. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
So, Amanda, let me start with you. Describe, if you would, some of the connectivity challenges that military bases commonly face and how the Department of Defense views the advent of 5G as a potential solution.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much. So the department really sees 5G as a potential to leverage what the commercial market is offering to the department in terms of communication. So I think 5G, more so than 3G or 4G, really offers some of the features that the department really can leverage. Things like low latency, ultra high bandwidth, the Internet of Things. So I think we are at a real point here where the department has the ability to leverage what industry is pushing forward and see how we can lean forward to try and make initial investments with industry to understand how the DOD can leverage 5G. So as part of the initiative, we're really looking at different use cases that 5G can be employed so that the DOD can really see the value for 5G. So things like being able to employ smart warehouses, so to enhance efficiency, things like employing augmented reality or virtual reality, really leveraging 5G to do that, where, it will be a big shift for the department. We're focused on employing 5G at bases around the country to demonstrate those use cases. So, we've got sort of a twofold challenge we're looking at. So we're employing private 5G networks at these bases, but we're also looking at the future of how do we provide those bases where we've got folks living on post? How do we integrate the commercial 5G networks with those private networks that will allow the department to do, the operational employment and test and evaluation, all of the things that we need to do while working with those commercial counterparts. So developing those hybrid networks and really, I think driving how DOD can work with commercial industry, recognizing that DOD is really not driving the technology here. Rather, we should be trying to harness what industry is pushing forward and see how the DOD can use it.
Well, Bryan, before we go a lot further, I know there's several forms of 5G. Do us a favor and let's just define what 5G technically means from a signal and technology perspective. And why has it become an important and timely development for military bases in particular?
Sure, great question, Wyatt. And I will echo what Amanda's earlier comments here, where we see it opening or unleashing a lot of potential for the DOD. But in terms of signal and transmission in terms of 5G, what Verizon has done specifically, as well as the industry, starting out obviously with 4G, building on top of 4G technology, something called 5G nationwide, where you're using, not to get too technical, but it's called dynamic spectrum sharing, where you're actually using 4G technology and some advanced spectrum to actually offer 5G services. That was the first forte into it. And the big shift is what we call ultra wideband, where we're actually using 5G millimeter wave, which operates in the higher end of spectrum, right? A lot of bandwidth, short propagation. And then most recently, you start bringing in technology around C-band, which is mid or low band technology, where you can go further wider on the military base, right? So having the ability to offer 4G, 5G nationwide, 5G C-band, and 5G ultra wideband via millimeter wave really gives a lot of different flavors of 5G for the military to use for those various applications. And what we see is, depending on the use case, hopefully, and there will be technology to support that, right? So as you can imagine, smart warehouse was mentioned, right? So having autonomous vehicles, they're going to need the ultra low latency, a lot of bandwidth, right? In terms of making those turns in the warehouse, avoiding personnel, but also streaming video. When you look at Pelican cases, right, doesn't really require a lot of bandwidth. So you're going to see lower bandwidth applications, right, that I'm tracking a pallet or a case, but I still need to be connected in an overall environment. So depending on the use case, you actually match up the technology, which is very enticing to the DOD.
Well, Amanda, I understand the Department of Defense has several 5G implementation initiatives underway. Tell us a little more about what those initiatives look like, and why have you segmented them the way that you have, and what are you seeing so far?
Yeah, thank you. So we have really three main thrusts that we've established to try and push 5G for the department. So the first one is what we call accelerate. And that is where we have our tranches of prototype and experimentation efforts. And we've got a tranche 1, a tranche 1.5, and a tranche 2. And really it's just sequencing as far as the contracting mechanisms. So we initially went out with 4 sites, so 4 different bases around the country with 4 different use cases. And then we sort of had an in-between with Nellis Air Force Base being called out specifically to look at distributed command and control. And then we have a tranche 2, which is 7 additional bases. So in terms of timing, we've got the tranche 1 sites have their 5G test beds largely installed and up and running. We just had a ribbon cutting ceremony for our test bed out at Naval Base Coronado last week. So really, getting that 5G equipment installed and turned on, and really, a big lesson learned, I think, through working this has been the challenges with just getting spectrum approval and things like that in the department, and really overcoming those challenges. So we're getting there. We've learned a lot. And I think a lot of what we've learned, we've applied to the later tranches. So the tranche 2 to try and streamline things as best that we can. So, we're looking at a variety of different applications for 5G. So I think I mentioned the smart warehouses, AR, VR, edge computing. How do you take 5G to the tactical edge? And really employing all of the potential use cases that 5G can provide. So, I'm very excited about, I would say, the next 6 to 12 months to see how the initial set of tranche sites are tying together their test beds and their applications vendors. So really starting to see how the systems are being employed and used at each of the sites. So that's the accelerate portion. And we're also looking at security aspects as well. So understanding how do you, one, understand what potential vulnerabilities are, and then how do we go about developing mitigations to avoid those types of vulnerabilities for the department. Understanding that our needs in some cases might be similar to what commercial could provide, or there are probably going to be other use cases where we're going to want to be more protective of our information. But really sticking with the mantra that we want to provide our troops, our warfighters, the ability to leverage commercial technology and be able to use it and feel confident that their information is secure and protected when they're communicating in those potentially contested or congested environments.
Well, Bryan, I think Amanda gave us a great perspective on some initial applications already underway. Tell us, where do you see 5G fitting into the larger communications spectrum, if you will, for the military, and where does it stand to be most useful?
Sure. Thanks, Wyatt, for the question. As Amanda said, as OSD starts rolling out the tranches, as you mentioned, the various tranche levels, we're actively participating in those aspects one way or the other. Additionally, we're also building out a commercial network, right? So we have a great use case that Amanda's aware of with our MCAS or Miramar location there. We're actually working a private-public partnership together to deploy, which was the first military base to have commercial spectrum deployed, which was very exciting. So that's working hand in hand. It's not too far away from that Coronado Smart Warehouse. We see the technology most recently with the Air Force, with the operator to lease OTL-1, most recently OTL-2B, where we're actually deploying 5G and commercial spectrum on various Air Force bases throughout the country, as well as our commercial footprint that we already have in a lot of military installations beyond the Marines, the Air Force, Army locations, as well as the Navy. So we see a lot of potential, basically giving the military and also the military ecosystem, right? We have a huge expansion right now in Norfolk, right, where it's not just for the Navy, but also for large like Huntington Ingalls, right, as a large supplier to the Navy, and actually using that infrastructure from a commercial aspect that actually directly, not indirectly, affects the military in a good way in terms of construction and getting onboard diagnostics from a ship coming in and out of port. So we see that technology being used in conjunction with the experiments. The experiments will continue, which is very exciting, but at the same time, simultaneously, the commercial network will actually spread, right? And we see the military using this. And the technology is not just the AR, VR, the drone technology, the autonomous vehicles, which is very important. It's the basics, right? Connecting men and women to their loved ones, right? The ability to actually do a video call for their families and friends that they can't be with. Obviously, with the pandemic, where there was restriction on bases, where you couldn't go out or actually have individuals visit, right? Having that connectivity to bridge that digital divide to the loved ones is near and dear to our heart, and more importantly, to those men and women who serve. So we're very excited about the potential of technology and the ability to give more functionality to drive better outcomes, and more importantly, better applications for those military personnel.
Well, Amanda, back to you. Talk to us a little about some of the practical outcomes or benefits that you're starting to see already, and maybe some of the lessons that you're beginning to see with 5G's application.
Yeah, I think what's most exciting that we're realizing with these initial tranches is that we are seeing the performance that we are expecting. So that's really good news, right? So we're seeing the increased bandwidth and all of the goodness that 5G can provide. But we are really trying to focus on how do we transition these capabilities? So we will have made these investments in these experiment sites and these test beds. How do we take these test beds and applications and really transition them across the department? So we've established a 5G cross-functional team. So we're the lead for it right now in R&E, and we are working across OSD and across the services and the components to come together as a group to understand what technologies we have coming out of all of the experimentation sites and really across the portfolio. And working with all of our DOD components to understand how we can really transition that technology. So, and dare I say, focusing on trying to not fall into the standard program of record, or trying to have acquisition provide us the ability to be flexible, so that when the next generation of cellular communication technology becomes available, the DoD can quickly pivot to enhance our capabilities. So I'm really excited to focus on taking the capabilities that are coming out of the sites and really transition those across the department, and focus on how the DoD as a whole can provide interoperable capabilities to the DoD. So we're doing our best to avoid things like stovepiping and the Navy not being able to talk to the Air Force and so forth. But really excited about the opportunity there.
And lastly, Bryan, just to wrap up, what other recommendations or considerations would you offer military communications and IT teams as they ramp up their use of 5G?
Yeah, a couple things, and I just want to add to what Amanda said. So we're very excited, and what I can tell you, my enterprise counterparts are jealous of what the DoD is doing and pushing the envelope of 5G more than any other industry in a lot of cases in the United States, right? So from a research and engineering and the model that they've used, I think it's very innovative and forward thinking. So we're encouraged by that. At the same time, we also have to understand the operational piece, right? So as a lot of the work is going to these R&Es, there's a lot of work that can be done today and taking advantage of this technology. And my recommendation to the military, and you're doing a lot of this already today, so not to be repetitive, but it always goes with security, right? So the structure that they're looking to do using trusted partners, right? Supply chain's a huge issue, not just from a getting availability of resources with COVID and the pandemic, but more importantly, where those pieces are actually sourced from, right? So we look from a nation state standpoint, that is paramount. I think at the same time, I think one of the challenges we've seen deploying 5G on military installation, there's still, as Amanda mentioned, stovepipes, if you will, where we're actually, how do you get fiber to these locations? How do you get right away access to construct? In a lot of cases, we're running in some of these locations. These are historical preservation sites, right? So there's limitations of what you can actually do in putting infrastructure. And I think in some cases, what we see is the military, and they do this all day, they're a mobile first community, right? The men and women out there serve are outside the four walls, right? But there's a lot of four walls within the military installation that can take advantage of 5G, or also in cases 4G, where in some cases the policy might not allow for in-building cellular coverage, right? And that, that's enhancement, right? That's lessons learned. And obviously we want to be sensitive to that community, because obviously from a security standpoint, classified environments, but at the same time, the men and women that are coming into the, they live in a mobile first world, right? And they want the ability, the expectation is their government issued device or DOD issued device should work anywhere in the base, right? Where security allows it to do so. So there's still ways to go to actually make that reality, and working and providing that infrastructure in a secure and efficient manner is still an ongoing process right now. And we encourage that. We know, and I think Amanda would agree with me on this, is I think the R&D experiments are really pushing the envelope and what's possible. And there's a lot of red tape being cut through, which is exciting. But once you set that bar, once you set that expectation, that is now table stakes. And now you're expected to do that for all the operation, not just an isolated part on the base, right? If you do one warehouse, somebody's going to say, I have 10 warehouses, I have 20 warehouses, and I have 20 bases with 20 warehouses. I want that stable level expectation. So it's good, but also the pressure ratchets it up to deliver on those promises that you've seen.
Well, Amanda and Bryan, thank you so much for sharing not only your insights, but some practical view as to how 5G is really gaining traction at military bases here in the CONUS and eventually around the world. So thank you so much for taking part in today's interview.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Thank you, Wyatt.